Alrighty, so today we are going to preview probably one of the most hated week that each fan base, coaches, and also players hate to look forward to, and that of course is playing games during the international break. And obviously, we can continue to have this age-long debate of whether or not if games should be happening during international break. Which the answer to that is obviously a resounding no, because as I said many times before, it's it's getting to a point where, in the year of 2024, we should not be having this discussion of why in the world does MLS games still playing during international break. And especially now that we're into September and heading into the stretch run, we should not be seeing teams that are basically forced to play reserve players and are pretty much just completely handicapped because of their main players gone to international break during the stretch run where some of these teams may have playoff aspiration or even trying to get into better seating so they can get home field advantage later on in the season. And as we'll talk about in these 6 games, there are some teams that are very heavily restricted because of this international break and pretty much been hammered because of it. And one of those teams is the Columbus Crew. So this is pretty much going to be look like Columbus Crew 2 versus the Seattle Sounders, as the Crew coming into this game 14-7-4, whereas Seattle is 11-7-9. This, of course, is the first of 3 games that's going to start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. There's a chance where I can actually do the review of all these games by the end of tonight, because there's actually only going to be one game that starts at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. And I'm hoping there's not going to be some crazy thing that will happen in this one, because I'll use that as the time to basically write down the notes and put up the board, and I can start the review of all these games as soon as this game finish. But that being said, again, this is a match that we've seen before in a big game. I mean, this is the rematch of the 2020 MLS Cup. In terms of the all-time meetings, Seattle still has the better all-time meeting against Columbus, 7-6-5. But as I mentioned, the Crew are pretty much forced to start almost their second team again, as Mo Farsi, Nicholas Hagen, Cucho Hernandez, Steven Moreira, Jason Russell and Patrick Schulte also not available in this one. So they're gonna have to rely on their third string. I think Evan Bush is still with their team right now. So he's pretty much gonna be thrust into action because both Schulte and Hagen is on international duty. And for Seattle, there's only 2 players that is on international duty. You got Nuhu and Opar Vargas on international duty. I'm surprised Jordan Morris is not on international duty. I'm surprised the U.S. Doesn't call him up. I mean, I know no, he hasn't been called up by the U.S. for a while now, but with the way that he's been picking up his scoring form, and with the way that the U.S. Need goal scoring, I was assuming Jordan Morris may get a call up by the national team again, especially with the way that these friendlies, it seems like the US are calling more MLS player, and almost like these September friendlies are kind of like cupcake January camp that we usually see the US do in January. But either way, this should be an interesting matchup. Now obviously I know Seattle fans will be happy that they don't have to face the best of the Columbus Crew, but let's be honest, if there's one thing we know about the Columbus Crew, well, there's 2 things we know. One, they don't lose at home very often. As I mentioned before, they've only lost twice ever since Wilfred Nancy took over this team at Lower.com Field. That is an insane, crazy home record. I mean, you talk about probably the toughest place to play on the road. Lower.com Field is probably right at the top of that list. But not to mention, just because the Columbus Crew is going to be a little bit hamstring because of international duty, doesn't mean their reserve is going to step up. I mean, I would say that one thing that make this Crew team maybe right now the favorites of winning MLS Cup is that not only they have that top end talent, but they have the depth to do so. This is probably the deepest team I think any MLS team has had, and it's no surprise because of the depth. That's the reason why they've been so good, even if they're battling multiple competition. I mean, usually when we talk about teams that battling multiple competition, they might have a bit of a setback, but that's not the case with this Wilfred Nazi Columbus Crew team. This team is still going strong right now, and part of that is because the depth of this team has really helped, and that Seattle shouldn't be thinking that this is going to be an easy matchup, especially against a Crew team that, as I said, even if they put in their second team, and shown it too a couple of weeks ago when they played against the Union, where they were pretty much putting a Crew 2 kind of team, they still were able to walk away with a victory. So this is not going to be an easy matchup for Seattle, as it is the case when anybody play against the Columbus Crew, either both at home or even away, but especially at home because of how good they are. Not only this season, but ever since Wilfred Nancy took charge of this team. Now, moving on, we got New England versus St. Louis. So New England 8-2-15, whereas St. Louis is 5-2-10. It's kind of interesting that all of these early kickoff are all interconference matchup after we only got like one of them last week. But this is the first ever meeting between both of these teams, as expected, because anytime when St. Louis play against an Eastern Conference team, most likely that Eastern Conference team have not faced St. Louis in their inaugural year. Now, players on international duty, you got Xavier Arriaga, Ismail Beratovic, and Asram Yosef for St. Louis. They're probably the luckiest team this international break because they have nobody that is going to be missing due to international break. So, yeah, this is a big opportunity. I would say that, when you have a matchup that is an interconference matchup, it's big to, of course, win those games. Because especially with the way that both of these teams are kind of right in the similar situation where they're kind of far away from the playoffs, but they definitely have some momentum. Certainly, it will be very interesting to see who, of course, will win this matchup and keep their faint playoff hopes alive. Now, moving on, we got the New York Red Bulls versus Sporting KC. So the Red Bulls 10, 12, and 5, but they are definitely fading a bit. Whereas Sporting KC, they're 7, 6, and 14, another team that just kind of have faint playoff hopes alive. But let's be honest, this is a team that is putting all their basket in terms of that U.S. Open Cup final against LAFC. Now, all-time meeting 23, 14, and 23 is the all-time meeting phase. Actually, dead even at 23 wins and 14 for the draws for both of these teams. Player on international duty for the Red Bulls. They're not going to have their main goalkeeper, Carlos Cornell. He's going to be with Paraguay on international duty. They also won't have one of their center back, Noah Ile. They also won't have Lewis Morgan with Scotland and Aiden Stokes for the Red Bulls. So most likely in terms of backup goalkeeper, Ryan Mayer is going to make to start in this game. For Sporting KC, usually they're a team that don't have players on international duty, but they actually have one player that's going to be on, and that, of course, is Steven Afrifa. He's been so good for Sporting KC that the Canadian national team has really started to call him up because of it. So great to see he's got that call, especially again. This is a guy that a couple of months ago you would have never heard who he is, but he has really stepped up ever since he was given the opportunity to show what he can do. And my goodness, he definitely have shown his ability doing his time for Sporting KC this year. But yeah, should be interesting matchup again. For the Red Bull, they desperately need a win. I mean, it has not been going well for the Red Bulls, and it sucks the fact that they're started to cool off and started to look wobbly as we're heading to the stretch run, because that meme, that's so Metro meme, or the that's so Metro narrative that always kind of lives by every Red Bulls fan. It feels like it's gonna happen again if they keep the form that they're in right now, especially with the lack of finishing. I mean, the lack of finishing is what's holding this team back. Of potentially defeating that narrative of that so Metro. And for Sporting KC, like St. Louis, they have a very faint playoff hole, but they're still technically alive in terms of the playoff race, and we'll see where they can make a really late push to make things interesting in the Western Conference playoff race. Now, we got Chicago versus DC, as this is the first of two games that starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. And, out of all these games that you could say it's a playoff pointer and it's a desperation derby, this is definitely one of them, because both of these teams, as I mentioned, anytime when you have a matchup between two teams that are facing each other, that is part of that logjam of a Eastern Conference playoff race we have between eighth all the way to the bottom of the standings. Yeah, you know it's gonna be a playoff 6 pointer. And for the Fire, 6, 8, and 13 is the record, whereas DC is 7, 8, and 12. All-time meeting 28, 23, and 27 in favor of the Fire. Player on international duty, only two players missing due to international duty. You got Giorgio Gutierrez and Ariel Laster not available for the Fire. For DC, Boris Eno, Aaron Herrera, and Matti Patola missing due to international duty. So not really guys that I mean, there are a couple of starters on the team. I mean, DC probably will have the harder luck because they do miss two starters on their team in this one. But no doubt that this should be an interesting game. And again, as we're winding it down to the season, especially when you have two teams that, again, it feels like they're in the same situation where they're within in plus of potentially making the playoffs, but maybe they don't have enough to overcome it. Well, now that both of these teams face off against each other, we'll see whether or not if one of these teams can get that massive win to really push themselves into the playoffs. Because like I said, both of these teams are not that far away. I think they're only separated by like 1 or 2 points. Both of them are below the red line, but as I mentioned before, the Eastern Conference playoff race, it's gonna go down the wire. I think it's good with the way that it feels like. Even though at 1 week we thought that maybe there's a little bit gap, and then all of a sudden they bunched up again, just like what we saw last week when some of the teams above the red line lost, and some of the team below the red line won their game, and they're all bunched up again as a result. Now, moving on, we got Houston versus LAFC. Did we have this matchup just 1 week ago? Yeah, we did. I mean, this is one of those rare situation where we have two teams facing off against each other back to back week, and unfortunately, for LAFC, as much as they want to have revenge against Houston after suffering a surprising loss and a rare loss at home at BMO Stadium, they kind of are going to be like the Columbus Crew, where they're pretty much just going to be completely hamstringed because of this international duty. Because pretty much most of their attack is going to be gone for this international break against the Dynamo. Now, all-time meeting 6-5-4 in favor of LAFC, but as I mentioned, Houston has had LAFC number, especially in the regular season these last 2 years, and do not be surprised if they could have their number again, especially against an LAFC team that again is going to be absolutely hamstringed because of this international break. I mean, for Houston, the only player that they're missing is one of their backup goalkeeper, Xavier Valdez. But for LAFC, no Mate Bogush, no Denise Bowanga, no Omar Campos, no Massim Cheno, no David Martinez, and most importantly, no Kike Oliveira in this team as well. So there's your top three attack, those lethal front three attack, all not available in this game. So this is going to be rough for LAFC in this one. And again, especially it doesn't help when you're facing against a team that has had your number and a Houston team that, yes, I know the loss of Lawrence and Ellie is going to be a tough loss for them, but I think that they'll still do just fine. And if they can just pull the same formula they did against LAFC, I mean, if they can beat an LAFC team that were playing their main team, I'm assuming they could beat their backup roster as well. Though, as I said, that's a big assumption, and I will apologize to Houston fans in advance if I say that they'll definitely look like they're gonna win this one. Because again, one of the things I will say about the Dynamo is that this season at home, as much as I've mentioned many times that Houston are very good at home, they're not as good at home as you think they are. They have had some losses this season at home, and one of those were literally the last home game when they took a surprising 1-0 loss against Toronto. So the Dynamo, they got to be careful. They cannot just say that this should be a easy win again against an LAFC team that pretty much is going to miss their entire attack. They need to do the same thing that they did in the last week game. And also, for LAFC, I mean, you can't really say this is a trap game for them, knowing that the next game is a big game, that is El Trafico against the Galaxy, when you're basically missing half of your roster. In some way, maybe it's a good thing that you might miss half of your roster in this game, because now those guys hopefully might be good to ready to focus on that big game that we have between LAFC and LA Galaxy, and that game could maybe decide who could finish at the top of the standing this year in the Western Conference. And then we go to the last game on this board, which is Vancouver versus FC Dallas. So Vancouver 12-5-8, whereas Dallas is 9-5-12. This is the only late night game, and like I said, hopefully there's no crazy thing that happened in this game, because I want this game to pretty much just get completely out of hand, and then I'll probably just stop paying attention and start writing down the notes on the board. But anyhow, all-time meeting 12-8-10 in favor of Dallas. Now, player on international duty, unfortunately for Vancouver, they're another team that is pretty much hamstring because of this international duty. They're not going to have Ali Ahmed, no Andres Cubas, no Ryan Gaul, no Fafa Pico, and no Pedro Vite available in this roster. For Dallas, they do not have Show Kofemana, Patrick Delgado, Martin Paz, and Carl Sante in this one. So they're probably gonna put Jimmy Maurer back in goal in this one. And that, I would also say that for Dallas, this is a big opportunity. I mean, you're facing against a Whitecaps team that's gonna be missing a lot of their key starter. This is a huge opportunity to get 3 points, and especially when you're in the midst of this playoff race, and after suffering that devastating loss that they had against Colorado at home, they need to win these games. Now that's easier said to be done because Dallas this season, they haven't been doing very well this season on the road. I mean, they're never Dallas has never been a good road team, and it's not easy when you play against a Whitecaps team that is very good at home this season at BC Place. But with the way that given the circumstances where Vancouver's not going to have their best player, this has to be a game that Dallas needs to win. In fact, I mean, I don't want to say this is a must win game for Dallas because we're not at that stage yet. Well, we're pretty close to it, but given where Dallas is in the standings, and if they want to get themselves in above the red line, and keep in mind, all those teams that is in the bubble, all of them have played exactly the same amount of games. So while there are some teams that have a game in hand, and this week is the game that they have in game in hand, Dallas don't have that luxury. This is a game that they're gonna have to play, and then after they play this game, and if they don't win this game, now they find themselves not only below the red line, but now there's gonna be teams around them that will have that game in hand, and then it just again it just it gets daunting for this Dallas team if they want to stay in the playoff race, or at least stay in it until the final day of the season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of my preview of these 6 games. Like I said, there's a chance where I'm gonna do the review of all 6 of these games when this game between Vancouver and Dallas is finished. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of these 6 games and your prediction in terms of all these 6 games as well. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.